Now, David, amongst the many beliefs we share in common is one that we both believe that art is a great communicator. It's a great gateway to appreciation and understanding between different peoples and different natures and cultures.
I didn't expect anything else from a director of one of the greatest museums in the world, but what I had. But at the same time, I could just add by saying that religion and politics have their own language, but the language of art is universal. And there has never been more need for that universality.
Right now, I agree.
Right now.
But of course, the burning question on everybody's lips is, how is it that an Iranian Jew has assembled the greatest collection of Islamic art in private hands?
I suppose the burning question should be, why not? Because at the end of the day, the Muslim and Jews are cousins. We are all the children of Abraham. We lived in harmony and peace for centuries. And if I can contribute to that understanding by enhancing and promoting one of the greatest cultures in the world, which is Islamic art, and show to the rest of the world how much the West owes to the East, namely to the Muslim culture, and how much contribution Muslim culture have made to the West, I could give myself a sort of a comfort that I have played a small role in bringing the two cultures together, and I consider my contribution as a contribution from one member of the family to another.
You actually describe yourself as a custodian of your collection, don't you?
I'll tell you why, because all my life I had a problem with ownership. The question of ownership is something that doesn't grasp my imagination. Nothing belongs to anybody. At the end of the day, every one of us are temporary custodians of what we hold. So if I'm in a position to be a temporary custodian of what I have somehow put together, and I could make a statement by doing that, so at least it gives me a comfort that as somebody who lived on this planet for, let's assume, 70 years, 80 years or 90 years, I compare the span of my life compared to the span of humanity and life of the planet.
It's very brief.
A drop in ocean.
Yeah.
So that drop in ocean can maybe help of bringing peace and harmony. And I even go further by saying that if you look at the ocean, you have always to remember that the ocean, with all its greatness, is a combination of billions of drops. So every drop helps.
Every drop matters.
Absolutely, and every drop matters.
Now, the other thing, of course, behind us here, you publish your collection in the most amazing way. But I think one of the great contributions to that book that you wrote, The Timeline in the History of Islamic Art and Architecture, which is, for me, is a wonderful panorama and completely comprehensible. That book was invaluable.
Let me emphasize that for the last almost 18 years, I've been traveling worldwide lecturing on Islamic art and architecture. I have to remind you that in all the areas that I collect, be it Islamic or Japanese or Spanish or Swedish, and a single other collection that is going to be surprised, and many people didn't know we owned, which is going to be revealed this year, I lecture and I write about. But when I lectured about Islamic art worldwide, at the end of it, a lot of people in the audience used to approach me, mostly Muslims, and sometimes non-Muslim, Christians, Jews, and other faith and religions, and say, are you trying to tell us that what you showed is Islamic? We always thought and believed that Islamic is 100% religious. So I had to explain to them the following. I had to tell them that unlike Christian art, which is almost 95% exclusively religious, Islamic art has been misunderstood. Islamic art is almost 95% secular. The most religious part of Islamic art is art of the book, Qurans and manuscript. But if you take that out of the sequence, an equation, then you are left with a huge body of the material, which is virtually secular. So I told people, that what you see on a screen makes a huge statement, and this statement has not been shared by a lot of people who are supposed to be the custodian of this great culture. So I decided as a contribution to go and pick number of objects from the collection that could be the representative of culture of Islam and put them in sequence according to the dynasties from the beginning of Islam to the 20th century, create a timeline and visually represent this great culture. And I should even mention here, because it's the right time for it, I believe that this book can be the passport of pride and dignity to the Muslims.
Yeah.
To them is a passport of pride and dignity, and to the non-Muslims is a source of information to understand how much Islam has contributed to the betterment of the life of the West.
Which brings us to the show. So when we talk about this fantastic exhibition for Australia from your collection of over 20,000 works of Islamic art, and you've handpicked about over 300 works of the absolute cream of your collection. When we look at it, about 95% of those works are also secular by nature.
They are, and let me tell you that I did not pick the 300 pieces myself. You had a lot to do with it. It was a joint effort between two of us. We tried to pick up objects that make a statement. As I said, we wanted to make sure that the visitor who visits the exhibition would somehow have access to, if, let's assume that the visitor knows about Islamic art. So there are enough there to cater for the people who are visually somehow familiar with Islamic art. If you know a bit about Islamic art, there is a still tremendous amount of number of objects there that would satisfy your visual taste and adds to your knowledge. And if by any chance you're somehow not so familiar with the Islamic culture, there is still objects there that doesn't need to be explained, because every object, according to me, has its own soul. It talks to you.
But in the collection that's coming to Australia, there are certain works which are absolute standout ones. I mean, I can think of certain things like the Chronicles, the Gold Saddle, all kinds of, and the Houghton manuscripts, for example, which are so stunning and so beautiful that anybody can respond to them.
I do agree with you. A lot of the objects in the exhibition are considered the relics of the humanity, not Islamic art, not Islamic culture, but it belongs to the humanity. That is how they've been referred to. A lot of them are unique. You don't see similar ones to any major museum or institutions worldwide. I could name you the gold saddle of the 13th century, which some people believe belonged to Genghis Khan, possibly. Or the 21 miniatures that are going to be shown for the first time, which depicts the history of the world by Rashiduddin, who, by the way, was a converted Jew who became a vizier in 1314, and the book was written in 1314. In actual fact, it's in two halves. One half is in Edinburgh, and this is the other half. And for the first time, out of 90 miniatures, you see 21 miniatures on display. You see 10 Hotan Shahnameh page. We call it Hotan, but it is a book which was written under the patronage of Shah Tahmasp, who was one of the founders of the Safavid dynasty in Iran. So you see 10 of the finest pages of that period. You see probably the most incredible group of glass, pottery, metalwork, scientific material, jewels of India, objects of enamel from India. You see one of the greatest albums of royal court from India, which was written for Aurangzeb, who was the son of Shah Jahan. Doesn't need to be explained. He's the one who built Taj Mahal in Agra. The father was very secular. The son, who ruled probably much longer than the father, almost 50 years, was a very religious man. So the album which was written for the father was of miniatures. The album that he decided to write as a legacy of his time in power was mostly calligraphic. So he started from the time of Yaqut al-Mustasami, who according to many scholars can be compared to the Rembrandt of the old masters, and up to the time of his reign, which was end of 16th, early 17th century. So you have 60 pages of illumination and calligraphy, which is representative of the time of Aurangzeb during his reign in India.
But the one, in a sense, the one sort of common theme that right through the exhibition has to be examples of the Quran, doesn't it?
I'll tell you, because the language of Quran was Arabic, God spoke to his prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in Arabic. So Arabic has a special place in the heart of the Muslim worldwide. And the word of God was written in that language. Even though most Muslims, part of them, do not speak or read Arabic, but through translation and through the preaching of the Qurans, they become familiarized with the teaching of the Qurans. So in old days, like everything else, there was no question of, I come up with a written book or written word and you go and publish it, and publish 10,000 copies or 100,000 copies. Those days everything was written by hand. And the only way you could pass the message down from generation to generation was in a form of a written form. So if you could afford to sponsor or be a patron in your lifetime, it was important to be able to commission for somebody to write a Quran for you. That was your contribution to your religion.
And what you were saying earlier, that one of them has calligraphy by Aurangzeb's daughter.
There is a Quran in actual fact, which was written by Aurangzeb's daughter Sian. It's the only Quran that we know of which is written by a woman, and it shows the greatness and the respect that the Islam used to give to the woman during the time of the Prophet.
An important message.
And it's an important message that is being shown by the example in this exhibition, in actual fact.
What would you hope for the Australian public to get out of this exhibition?
I'm not here I'm not here to show this exhibition and tell the Australian people I'm here to educate you, not at all. No. I'm here to tell them, I'm here to inform you about the greatness of culture of Islam. I'm here to tell you, and I do that through my lectures, through my writing, through my sponsorship of publication. I'm here to say that at the end of the day, the real weapon of mass destruction is ignorance. And I hope that through the visiting of this great exhibition, we could dilute that ignorance somehow and show people that there are ways of nations and cultures to come together through the language of art.
It will work.
I hope it will work.
You know it will.
Pleasure.